Hey there, you're listening to episode 160 of the Finish Line podcast, where we discuss the intersection of faith, generosity, and personal finance. My name is Cody, and I'm here with my co-host and brother Keelan. Today we're talking to Alan Barnhart, CEO of Barnhart Crane and Rigging. Alan took over the small business from his parents in his 20s when it had 6 employees. From the beginning, he always viewed it as God's business, eventually moving all his shares of ownership into a charitable trust. Today, the company is worth nearly $1 billion and fuels millions of dollars into the kingdom each year. You don't want to miss this one. Before we get started, I just wanted to ask one big favor of you. If you've been listening to the show for some time and want to support what we're doing, one very easy and free way to do that is to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Just write whatever you like about the show, and you'll help others find us. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the show so you're the first to know when new episodes come out. With that, let's get started. All right, we're here with Alan Barnhart. Alan, thank you so much for taking some time to join us.
Oh, it's a joy to be with you. Thank you.
So, Alan, can you tell us a little bit about what life was like growing up? And also tell us about your faith journey as well. How did that begin?
I was born in Pennsylvania, moved down south when I was about 6 years old, grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, to a culturally Christian family. We went to a little Methodist church, didn't really understand the gospel until I was in high school. Ministry called Young Life came out to our high school and told us about Jesus. And it was great to hear about a God who loves me. It was tough to hear about my sin and how I had a real problem, and then really good to hear about the cross and how God had taken care of my problem. So I embraced the Christian faith when I was in high school, right before my junior year in high school.
What did life look like kind of in some of the early years as you started out into your career? Where did that begin to take you, and how did that faith start to play out in some of the decisions you were making?
I grew a lot in my faith in college, mainly because I connected with some other guys who are growing in their faith. I studied engineering with the plan of coming back and working in the small family business. But as I was about to get out of college, some of my friends were saying, Alan, you need to go to seminary, or you need to go on Young Life staff, or do something significant with your life. Go into full-time ministry. And as I prayed about that, I said, God, I'll go wherever you want me to go. I was at that point in my life, and hopefully still am, but came to the conclusion that all of us who are followers of Jesus are in full-time ministry. A few of us will get our paycheck from a charity and a church, but all of us should be using our skills and our gifts full-time to serve him. And that I felt God had gifted me more in the area of business and engineering than he had in preaching or writing. So I felt like my full-time ministry was going to be in the business world. So I came back to Memphis with a plan to do that. I came and worked for a mom and pop company. Our international corporate headquarters was 2 bedrooms of the home I grew up in. Mom wrote every paycheck and kept all the books, and my dad ran the company, and we had about 6 or 7 employees at that time. So it was a real small family business. We had grown up doing it every summer, high school and college. We worked in the company. So we knew how to run cranes and drive trucks, and it was a fun way to grow up. But came to work full time in 1983. And then 3 years later, my parents decided to leave the business. It was in 86 that was kind of had a watershed moment of my parents leaving and my brother and I becoming partners in a new company that was basically a continuation of their business. But at that point, made some commitments that were really safeguards for us that were really helpful.
Yeah, Alan, do you mind digging in a little bit more into, as you are stepping into the business world, as you are kind of taking over with your brother, how did you start to plan for the potential of great success in the business world from a personal perspective?
Yeah, we really weren't even thinking a lot about that, but I decided to read through the whole Bible to see what it said about money and business. And so I spent a couple of years doing that and cataloging these verses. This was when I was still working for my parents. And there were so many warnings and so many danger. Jesus warned about money 10 times more than he warned about anything else. All these crazy statements like it's hard for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven, and you can't serve God and money, and don't store up treasure for yourself on earth, and these parables of the guy with the bigger barns, and on and on and on. And I came away from that with a fear of wealth, fear that business success could be detrimental to my spiritual life. And so when my brother and I started talking about becoming partners in a business, we said, man, we've got to put some safeguards in our life to make sure that business success doesn't hurt us. So I'm so thankful that God gave us those thoughts, those passages of scripture, those warnings, because it's really set us free. And so my brother and I now have been partners for 39 years, and we've never argued about money. The two safeguards that we put in place, one was we committed the company to God, said everything we have belongs to God, including this company. It's God's company. Technically, my brother and I each owned half. The second thing we said is we're going to protect ourselves against the dangers of wealth. We're going to put a cap on our lifestyle. And if God chooses to prosper the company, we're not going to see that as a call to ratchet up our lifestyle. So we selected a relatively simple lifestyle, committed to it for the rest of our lives. And that's what we've been living. Now, we didn't know if the company, we weren't planning for big success. I mean, it was a mom and pop company. Mom and pop were leaving and they left. I mean, they got on a sailboat and sailed around the world, literally. So they were completely gone. I'm a 25-year-old kid. We weren't sure if we'd survive the first year, but just in case, we wanted to put those safeguards in. And man, I'm so thankful we did, because we had no idea what God was going to do, but it's been kind of a wild ride since then.
Yeah, can you dig in a little bit more to that decision? I think that idea of a finish line has become much more widely known, at least today, but still people really struggle with that process of actually doing it. I think people often recognize the value of it, but when it gets down to the practical level of actually just committing to a number, people really get hung up. And so how did you kind of work through that? And what kind of framework did you actually use to settle in on a number?
We weren't committing to a Mother Teresa lifestyle. We were wanting to make an income that would be similar to people that were in ministry in our city. If they can live on that, we can live on that. So that was the basic idea. And over time, we ended up with we had 6 children. My brother had 5 kids. So the number went up over the years as we started having kids, but the concept of a relatively simple life continued. Not a Mother Teresa life. We had air conditioning and vehicles and plenty of food to eat, and we had all the tools we needed to function in our society, but we did shy away from the toys. And so we didn't leave ourselves enough money for some of the extravagant toys. But I think that actually was a blessing, not a sacrifice. I think it was a good thing.
Well, Alan, years ago when Keelan invited me to consider setting a financial finish line, frankly, I was not interested, and I couldn't imagine why I would ever do such a thing. And it got to the point where he said, well, listen, it sounds like I'm not going to convince you. Why don't you just try it for 3 months, kind of like a risk-free trial, if you will. Yeah. But that was just one barrier. He kind of met all of my objections. But then there's the real dynamic of talking to my wife and saying, what do you think? Like, this has implications for both of us and things that we've dreamed about in the past. How did you start to work through these decisions with your wife?
My wife, she was fine with it. She was perfectly fine with us going on the mission field and living a much simpler life than we actually lived. She was not a material girl. So that was not a big issue. And I think for a lot of people that could be a substantial issue. I think a lot of times it would be the guy that's maybe more the problem than the gal. But it was not scary to us. And the further down the road we've gone, the less scary it's become. To us, it set us free. It was a danger to be avoided. And setting this finish line just eliminated a whole lot of angst. My brother and I didn't have to talk and argue each year about what we're going to do with the company profits. We decided on the front end. We had a finish line, so we knew what our lifestyle could be. And so our kids didn't grow up as rich kids, but they grew up with everything they needed. And I know it is scary for some people because they're afraid they're going to miss out on some toys. But there's a verse that says, godliness with contentment is great gain. And I feel like we've experienced that great gain. Contentment doesn't come from getting stuff. We're not built to be satisfied with stuff. Contentment comes from enjoying what you have. And I think we've been able to experience that. Our children have been able to experience that. I mean, we're all human beings and there's moments. But I think in general, it's been freedom, not bondage. You would think setting a lifestyle finish line would cramp your style. You're putting a constraint in your life and it's going to take away all your fun. it's fun to try to figure out how to make do and how to have a lot of fun as a family without spending a lot of money. That's an enjoyable thing by itself. We found that setting those constraints in our life set us free. And I think that when you stop and think about it, living a life without constraints sounds like freedom, but it really leads to bondage in almost any area of your life. If you take away godly constraints, I think it can lead to bondage. So, and a big part of the whole thing is our view of God. I mean, who is God and who are we? And does everything belong to God or not? If I have rights to my stuff, that's one posture. If I have responsibilities as a steward, but no rights, which is the posture we would have, that's a whole different posture. So it's not that I'm being deprived of my stuff. It's I'm consuming a certain amount of God's stuff and I'm putting some constraints on that. But if we talk about a simple lifestyle, globally speaking, we're filthy rich. I mean, we have so much that most people in the world don't have. Please don't feel sorry for us. We're not suffering at all. But I think we also haven't suffered from the disease or the thing that Jesus warned about. I mean, I think the holding things with an open hand has led to freedom. And how many times does he say, don't be anxious. Don't try to follow the world's path. And we've just found that God's not trying to extract something from us. He doesn't want our money. He wants us. But because he wants us to hold everything with an open hand and say, God, these are your things. And so that's the posture that we've had. And I tell you, it's a wonderful way to live. If this had been really hard, if this had taken a tremendous amount of discipline, I probably would have bailed out. But it's not been that. It's been a joy.
And I think we would both agree with you in just what we've experienced in our own families with similar kind of lifestyle. So you mentioned, making some changes over the years as the kids multiplied, and, I'm sure even just with inflation, things like that. What would you say has been, if you think back on all the seasons that you've had a finish line in place, which season did you find most difficult to have a finish line or to maintain a finish line?
Maybe the first couple of months. I mean, really, it's never been very difficult. Occasionally, you see your buddies getting fancy stuff, and there's a little bit of coveting that goes on. That didn't last long, and it wasn't intense. And the further down the road we've gone, the less that has had a hold on us. I don't want anybody's stuff, and I'm very happy to enjoy somebody's fancy place. We have friends that have lots of stuff we don't have. And I don't begrudge them and I don't covet what they've got. I'm glad for them and have some guys that are very generous with some amazing facilities that they have. And I'm very happy to enjoy them with them. It's not been hard. There's been no season where I was like, gosh, I wish we hadn't done that. This is tough. There's been no season like that.
Alan, in this podcast, we've heard quite a few stories of people who have set finish lines. I'm sure many of them inspired by your story, which is featured in numerous places, including the Journey of Generosity. But I'm curious, had you heard of somebody else doing this at the time? Did you have a template for setting a lifestyle cap?
I read a book by a guy named Ron Sider that was called Rich Christians in the Age of Hunger. Very convicting book. He talked about a graduated tithe and how you should, as you start making more money, it shouldn't be 10% anymore, and it should get up to a place where it becomes 100%, so effectively capping your lifestyle. That appealed to me. I thought that was a good example. Read a lot of stuff from Larry Burkett, and this is back in the late 70s, early 80s, and I read about a guy named R.G. Letourneau and how he gave away 90% of his income. An amazing guy, with highly productive guy. Another guy named Stanley Tam that gave away his business. There were lots of people that had done it before us. But, probably maybe the most inspirational was the widow. That's the Hall of Fame giving story in Scripture.
Yeah.
Jesus wasn't impressed with the rich people putting a lot of money in the pot. Very impressed with the widow. And so I think we have so much. We're not making sacrificial gifts. We're giving out of our surplus, really. And so I think hearing some of the stories in Scripture were inspirational. And then a few folks in life, there's probably lots of other people. I know there's lots of other people doing it. There's lots of people living below their means and being generous. And that's really what we're talking about. Even if you're making 30 grand a year and living on 27 and giving away 3, there are people doing that. And there's people living in the third world that are living on $5 a day and giving away one of those. I mean, there's generosity everywhere. And God has designed us so that generosity benefits us. Greed is one of the choice tools of our enemy to mess with us. And I think it was a big deal 2,000 years ago. Jesus warned about it a lot then. I think it's a big deal today. Generosity breaks the power of greed. Holding what you have with an open hand, distributing it to others, breaks the power of greed. And if there's no other reason to be generous, if it's not a matter of obedience, it's a matter of self-preservation and benefit to yourself.
Now, I know you've shared before, after a number of years of living with a finish line like this, it led to kind of how you viewed your actual ownership stake in the business. Maybe you can talk through some of that process of how God led you through some of that.
My brother and I each owned half of the company for the first 22 years. We had a very simplistic buy-sell agreement between us if one of us died. The company grew a lot, and it got to be worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and our little buy-sell wasn't going to take care of it, and there was going to be all kinds of estate taxes, and we started processing that and said, we're not being good stewards of this thing. We got to figure out what to do. So we went to our advisors, and they have all these gyrations to skip a generation and buy a bunch of insurance, and it's all cumbersome and expensive and, to me, dangerous. I was worried about the danger of money on my life. I'm certainly worried about it on a grandkid who doesn't exist yet and what it might do to them. So we got talking and said, let's see if we can just give this company away. And our advisors thought that was a terrible idea. But we went and connected with folks at the National Christian Foundation. And in 30 minutes, they told us how we could give away not 100%, but 99% of our company. And so we did. We transferred the stock of 99% of the company into a trust. And then we controlled the company with the 1% that had all the voting rights. And then sometime later, maybe 4 or 5 years later, we took that 1% and put it into a voting trust. So we don't own any of the company. But in one sense, we still own the company. We still work hard. We're still trying to develop it and grow it. The company's 4 times bigger than it was when we transferred the stock in 2008. We're still pushing to try to be the best company in the industry. In another sense, we never did own it. We gave it away in 1986. We gave it away really in 1977 when I said, God, I accept you as my Lord and Savior. That is when we transferred the title. Spiritually, purposefully, technically, we transferred the title in 2008.
So you kept your own lifestyle, and it sounds like your brother did as well. So you had some kind of community. You're doing that together, which I think is tremendously helpful, because Keelan and I talk about finish lines probably daily, and it never gets old to just explore generosity. But that means that as your company grew, there were a lot of profits that could have been distributed to you, but weren't. How did you think through what to do with the profit of the company throughout time?
Yeah, we decided on the very front end that if we had any profit, we would give 50% of it away each year. We picked that number because that's the number you could deduct from your taxes. Instead of paying 40% of that dollar to the government, we're going to keep it in the kingdom. As far as we were concerned, what's in our company is God's money, and what's in ministry is God's money. And so that's all one pot. And we didn't want to diminish that pot by paying unnecessary taxes. I mean, we pay our taxes, but if we could minimize it, we'd try to do that. And so from day one, we started giving away 50% of our income each year. When we gave away the company, we just continued to do that. So the amount of money has really increased over the years, but the concept is the same. God's providing. We're taking half of the money, using it to grow our business, take half the money and using it to fund ministry. And God's provided enough for us to be able to do both.
Just like the example you gave with transferring the ownership of the business, at least in the eyes of the IRS, but you continued to steward and manage it as if nothing changed. I find that can be true, especially as dollars given increase, that when you're giving to support a specific cause or to a specific ministry, there is the heart transformation aspect of releasing control, but also there's an invitation to enter into a relationship with wherever you're giving that money. How have you managed those relationships?
That's been some of the exciting stuff. We fund work internationally. 95% goes international. We try to go to hard places. we're meeting amazing brothers and sisters that are doing hard things beyond our wildest imaginations. And they're doing them for a long time in a hard place. And God lets us be part of their ministry and part of getting to know them and helping them. And so it's been a great treat for many years. I've traveled all over the world. I've been to 65 different countries and met some of the most amazing people. And I'm just a pretty regular guy running a crane business back, a construction guy. And God's opened up these doors for me to have all these relationships that have been great. So these are some of my heroes, and God lets us be part of their ministry.
As that amount has increased over time, what kind of strategies have you used to figure out how to distribute it wisely and effectively?
The first thing we did is we decided to not do it unilaterally, not do it ourselves. So we brought other people from within the company into that process and said, this is God's money. We're stewards of it. We need to figure out how to distribute it. Will you help us? And so initially it was 6 of us that got together and prayed and said, God, what should we do with this $50,000? We were amazed we had that money after the first year. Over time, it's become a lot more money, and we've had to get better at it. We've had to go to school and learn how to do this. And so we've studied at the feet of a lot of foundations and other givers who've been doing it for way before we were, and learned about strategy and learned about some of the pitfalls, read some books about some of the dangers of giving away money, and kind of became students of that. That group now is all people from our company. Actually, we have 6 different companies. People from each of those companies are part of that group, and their spouses also are welcome to join in that. And so about 60 folks get together in teams and figure out how to create strategies during the course of a year for funding ministry. I'm on the India team, so every year I go to India. Every month we meet lots of different people from India that are passing through. Had a Zoom call with one today, and over the course of the year, we create a portfolio of what we think we should fund in ministry. And then we take it to our board, and the board will approve it or modify it. And so no individual is making a decision. We're doing all this as a group, and there's some real benefits to that, because you can get kind of an ego thing or a pride thing or an emotional thing. And it's great having checks and balances where we have to go through a process. We have people fill out a proposal, do a due diligence process with them to make sure that what we're funding is a good thing. And if I were just doing a reactive funding, I think it would be much less effective. One of my quips is all of us ignore 99.999% of the need in the world. Nobody's going to be able to meet all the needs that there are. Most of the time we ignore them by not trying to learn about them. Occasionally we ignore them by saying no to someone who knocks on our door. But there's not much difference between those two besides the emotional part of it. I think it's perfectly fine to say no. And we say no to probably 99% of the stuff that comes our way because we want to say a big yes to some things that we've really studied and gotten good at. And so that's why we picked 4 areas of the world and put teams in each one of those areas to help us figure that area out. And so we're not responsive as people send requests. We go and try to find people that we can fund. And I think that's been a better way to do it. Now, I think it's better, and that's why we do it that way. But other people do it differently. And I think that lots of ways work. And I think some people are more spirit-led and more personal and the connection with an individual. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I just think all of it has danger. All of it needs to be done intentionally. We want to be as strategic in our giving of money as we are in our making of money. So we don't want to be flippant. We want to work hard at it. And it's really been helpful to have a team to do that with. And that team would be just fine if it were 4 people. But I really like the fact that I can't make any decisions.
Alan, when you're talking about these different layers of accountability and community, I think there's so much benefit to having that in running a business, in making giving decisions. I'm curious, how do you think about the difference between the company generates profits and you give away half of it, and you're working with a team of people to make decisions around that capital, but then there's also an amount that gets distributed to you, that's your income.
Yeah.
And you have much more control and less accountability. So you can give maybe in different ways, or at least it's less complex, I would say. Is there a difference in how you think through the two of those?
There is. And we do have personal money that we have saved over the years. And we're trying to reduce our balance sheet right now by distributing more of our money than's coming in. And so Catherine and I both personally have ministries that we're interested in. Just yesterday or day before, I sent money to about 6 different ministries. I like sending money in July because everybody gets their money in December. And so in July, I'll try to look through all the organizations that we like and send money to them. And so, yeah, it's a pittance compared to the money that's going out through the Grove Fund, but it's less strategic, more relational, still with some of the same concepts of not doing harm, though.
I'm interested, since you have explored so much of this on so many different levels. You've made many big and small giving decisions over the years, both from, the finish line, setting the finish line, and giving the ownership shares of the business, but also in how you distribute and give money out to ministries and work being done. As you think back over a lot of these decisions, what have been some of the most challenging decisions that you've been faced with in the generosity sphere?
There have been a few times where people within the group had some strong desires that we didn't think fit who we were. So there was some interpersonal things there. And that's where it's good to have a whole team to kind of bounce things back and forth. So there's been a little bit of that, not as much as you would think. And we try to be real clear about what we're doing. And so people that join us come with expectation management is everything. And they come with an expectation of joining what we're doing rather than trying to lead it. We've had a few gifts that were disappointing, that we did some things that we wouldn't do again. And it's not easy. I think one of the mistakes that people make is thinking it's going to be wonderful, it's going to be joyous, and I'm going to get a bunch of warm fuzzies every day because of this. And I think if you're chasing the warm and fuzzies, you're going to do a bunch of counterproductive things. It's not about us. Sometimes people say, what's your passion? What's on your heart? I said, I don't think it's the right question. I think, what does God want us to do with his money? And the fact that it doesn't make me feel really good today is okay. It's work. I mean, it's energy, it's work. There's times when you have to say no to people. There's times when somebody you've been supporting for a while, you learn that they are mediocre or worse, and you say, we're gonna go another direction. They don't like that. So those things all happen, and it's all, I don't want to make it sound like this is so wonderful. This, just make you feel good all the time. There is work to being a steward, and work is a good thing. Work's not an evil word, but it's part of the tasks that God has put before us, and we work hard at it.
I've definitely seen that to be true in my own life, that it's probably easier to give or serve or work towards something that I'm already passionate about. But sometimes God instructs something new or different than what I would have planned. And that helps to shape my heart around whatever that is. But as a business leader, I'm curious on all of the relational dynamics involved with just the way that you've stewarded the business with your brother. How do the leadership team, how do employees, both past and present, kind of respond to the decisions that you've made?
98% positive. There've been a few that said, hey, if you can give away all this money, how come you don't pay me more? There's been a little bit of that, but not much. And I think most people like working for a company where they're giving back, even if they're not believers. The concept of doing things to help other people is a good thing generally. I think it's helpful that my lifestyle is not superior to the lifestyle of my team. A lot of our crane operators make a lot more money than I do, and I think that's okay. And I think, sometimes business owners set themselves apart with a lifestyle that's really different than the rest of their team, and they wonder why that causes a problem or a separation. I think it's when I'm no longer an owner, so I'm an employee like the rest of the guys are. And I think for a few people, we'd always made the commitment and told people who were joining our company, who were believers, what our commitment was. But I think until we gave the company away, a lot of them were saying, yeah, I hear you, but you still own 50% of the company. And when we transferred our stock out, then they said, wow, you really did it. This really was God's company all along. And so I think there's been, a few people think we're crazy. But a lot of the people that are in key leadership are believers. And what we're doing is not crazy. I mean, when you think about who God is, what he's done for us, how long we're going to live on this earth, how long we're going to live off this earth, what we've done is just perfectly logical given what we believe about God.
Along some of those lines, as people think through some of the decisions that you and Catherine have made, I think a natural kind of barrier that a lot of people would run into is, how would my kids respond to some of these decisions? And I know you've spoken about that before, but maybe you can walk through several of these kind of big decisions, especially limiting your lifestyle to just kind of a simple lifestyle. And also a big one of giving the ownership shares of the business away. Both, intrinsically do affect your kids and how they grew up. And I'd love to hear kind of how you guys thought through that and just what the process was like for them as far as you know.
I think my kids benefited greatly from it. There is some thought that I want to provide for my kids a lot more than I had, and I want to shield them and protect them and give them. I think money's dangerous for me and for my kids. And so we made our commitment before we had kids. And so kids just grew up like that. And when you're a little kid, you grow up. We lived out in the country, and a lot of our neighbors had a similar, simple lifestyle that we had. And so now when my kids got to high school and they started going to a suburban high school, there were a lot of people that had a lot of toys that they didn't have. And they're human beings and they want that stuff. And we had to have some conversations about the alternatives to being a consumer is to be a kingdom investor. And so we had to say no to our kids some, but we also took them all over the world to see the alternative. And so my kids, we didn't do the Disney World thing, but we took them to Egypt and to Nairobi, and we took them to Vietnam, and we took them to India, and we took them to Turkey, and meeting amazing people that have been beaten for their faith, people that are desperately poor and desperately happy and desperately committed to God. And so my kids got to see all that as they were growing up. People at our dinner table many times from around the world just talking about what God was doing in their country. And so my kids just grew up like that. And looking back on it, they don't see themselves as the victim of that. They had education, they had food, they had, and we had a bunch of great fun. We did Boy Scouts and we had all kinds of fun. So my kids don't feel like they're the victims. When we gave away the company, my oldest son was in high school, I think. And he came to me after we did that and he said, "Dad, thank you. Thank you for getting that done. If something had happened to you, this would have been a big mess and I'd have been caught up in it. And thank you for getting that settled." And so we didn't feel like the company was ours. So they didn't feel like it was theirs. It's a little odd because our last name is on the name of the company, but the way that we operated, the way that we treated the company, we didn't see it as ours. So our kids never saw it as theirs. And so the transferring of the stock was a non-issue. I think expectation management is crucial for kids. We're not planning to leave our kids a lot of money and a big will, not because we're trying to withhold good things. We're trying to withhold problem things from them. So we left them a rich inheritance of faith and work ethic and education and the tools that you need to function in your society. I mean, back in the biblical days, they left them land so you could work your butt off to make a living. And to me, the parallel here is giving people the tools to function well, and our kids have received those tools, and now they are adults and they are living that out, and they don't need our money. And if they did need it for some reason, we would be ready to step up. I mean, there were times, though, when our kids sort of needed the money because of some irresponsibility, and we let them suffer the consequences of their actions, and it was hard, and we wanted to bail them out, but for their sake, we did not. And I think that really shaped and helped them. And I think we could have hurt them by eliminating the pain. I think pain is a wonderful teacher. And I think some Christian ministries have this problem of trying to eliminate people's pain. And if somebody's crying, they would say there's a problem that has to be fixed. And maybe there's a problem that's going to be fixed by the pain if you'll let the pain do its work. And so we let our kids experience pain. I mean, we were there supportive, helping walk them through it, but letting them experience pain when they messed up.
Well, it sounds like you're still pursuing growth for the business and that's playing out. I'd love to hear more about how you've thought through kind of planning for succession, because the way that you've set things up, the success of the company has a tremendous potential for funding ministries, funding all kinds of amazing work around the world. But the reality is, none of us really have all that much time here on earth.
Yeah.
So I can think through how the incentives might change for someone who might want to step into a leadership role in the company. How do you have those conversations and think about a transition like that?
Yeah, we don't impose our lifestyle limitations on anybody in the company. Lots and lots of people make more money than I do, and some make very good money. I'm about to step aside as the CEO after 39 years. The guy who's stepping in for me will make a lot more money than me and have good incentives. Every company has three elements. One is who owns it, who benefits from it, and then who runs it, who operates it. The decision we made by transferring our stock took care of those first two. It's owned by charity. It's going to benefit the kingdom. But that third one, it didn't answer. It allowed us to continue the company for the next 100 years because there's no estate tax issues. There's no transfer costs. So there's lots of advantages to what we did. And by the way, our tax bill is substantially lower than it would be if we were holding the stock. So huge advantages. We save millions and millions every year in taxes because of this. But we still have to figure out who's going to run it. And so we've been going through a process for the last several years, but intense for the last year or so, with a guy named David who's about to become the next CEO in about 2 weeks. And so I'm going to continue. I'm not retiring. I'm going to continue working, but I'm going to be working for him. I just felt like 39 years was a long time for a person to be in the same position. I love what I do. I'm going to do a whole variety of things at the company and outside the company. I think I'll be as busy as ever. I don't see retirement in the Bible anywhere. I think one day my body will give out or my mind will, and I'll be on the sidelines. But until then, I want to keep working, and I want to keep producing as much as I can produce, not necessarily financially, but in a whole variety of ways. So that's our transition plan. We have a board of trustees that control the company, control the voting shares of the company. That 1% that had the voting shares, we put in a voting trust. And now it's controlled by a board of trustees who could fire me whenever they want to. And so when I get hit by a truck or die or whatever, they will be responsible to make sure that the person running our company is running according to kingdom purposes. So they're kind of our anti-mission drift group. And they don't have a financial stake in the company. They have a spiritual stake in the company. And that group will self-replicate for the next 100 years and maybe beyond that, who knows. But the idea is we don't ever want to sell the company. We see the company as a ministry unto itself. People hear about Jesus here. People get their lives changed here. And the company continues to grow in value. And the company continues to spin off more money each year for ministry. So we want to keep that going. Don't want it to be dependent on me. And now it's not. A few years ago, I took a sabbatical for 4 months. And I hiked the Appalachian Trail. So I was completely off the grid, so to speak. The company did better while I was gone. Okay. So it's the company can be just fine without me, and they won't be without me. The guy who's running it, I work for him now. I've told him, I said, hey, tell me what you want me to do. I'm at your beck and call, and I'll leave if you want me to leave and go do some other stuff. I'll stay and help any way you want me to. We've pretty well worked through that now, at least for the first 6 months of what's going to happen. And after that, he may change things, and I hope he does. I think it'll get better, but we don't have the danger of him and by the way, he's not a family member. I do have a son who's a key player in our business, but I don't own the company. My son doesn't have a birthright to run the company. We want the best person running the company. And I think that's very encouraging for other people in the company. We've bought several companies over the years that have been sad stories. I mean, stories where the dad felt obligated to leave the company to the son. The son felt obligated to take the company and run it. He wasn't equipped to do it. The dad had a great business, and the son ran it in the ditch. And it was a bummer for the dad, and a bummer for the son, a bummer for the people that work there. That made me think, I don't ever want to do that. I have a prejudice because he's my son. And so I basically have told the board, if he's ever going to become the guy, it's not going to be because I'm not on that decision. That's for you guys to decide who's the next leader. I did select the guy that's coming in now, and he's going to be great. And he's been with us for 12 years, really good guy, solid believer. So I'm excited about that. But yeah, for a company to continue on, you have to have a continuity of leadership over the years. And that's a problem for any company. I think our structure makes it easier because we don't have to worry about transferring what I'd call the dangerous stuff, the value of the company. I mean, the company's worth lots of maybe $1 billion now, but there's nobody that's got an incentive to sell it. Nobody would benefit from doing that. And everyone has an incentive to develop it and take it to the next level.
Well, it's interesting, actually, the more that you have kind of intentionally let go or held it open-handedly has actually made it a lot easier to implement all this kind of succession planning and accountability, all these things where when it's all centralized in one person, you're very prone to one thing bringing a lot of stuff down. And since you have held it in this posture in so many ways and gradually continued to build out the layers of people involved and stuff, is actually a very helpful, self-replicating, sustainable process, which is really cool to see. And I'm sure that it will continue to be a powerful tool in the kingdom for many, many years. Kind of related to this transition period you're talking about, I know that you guys have been really good stewards of your story over the years. We've heard your story, I think, multiple times on this podcast that other people have shared. And I think, in the generosity space, there can be kind of I think it comes from a humility, but a hesitation to want to share about generosity. And so we can keep it very private. And I have no way of knowing this, but I would venture to say that you and Catherine, through sharing your story, may have unlocked far more generosity and giving through others than the large amount that you guys have been able to directly channel into the kingdom yourselves just by stewarding your story. And so I'd love to hear you kind of speak into that, what motivates you to share, how you have learned to do that well, and what you would say to people who are kind of hesitant to share their own stories.
Yeah, I don't blame them for being hesitant. We didn't share it at all for the first 15 years and just said, don't let the left hand know what the right hand's doing was our mantra. I think there's something to be said for that. I think there's a season for that. I think you got to evaluate your heart. We got challenged by people that said, hey, God's done an amazing thing. This isn't about you. God's done something. You need to be willing to tell it. A few verses before the left hand and right hand is a verse that says, let your light shine before men in such a way they see your good works and glorify your Father. And we hope that's the result of this. Look what an amazing God can do through ordinary people. It's amazing. It's quite a story. And as we tell it, we're just thinking, golly, this has really happened. So it is a great story of what God can do as he brings a bunch of other people into our company, brings a team together, and blesses the company through a whole series of miracles. So it's a great story that we want to tell. And I do think a lot of people have been encouraged by it. A fair number of people have been set free. I think this whole area of money is an area of bondage for people in the Christian world. Evangelical Christians, people who have said, I surrender my life to God, give 3% of their income to anything charitable. I mean, what's up with that? There's just a tremendous amount of bondage in this area. People feeling like they got to hold on to their money. And that's what Jesus warned us about so many times. You can't serve God and money. Be careful. Be on your guard against all forms of greed, he said. So hopefully our story has opened some eyes and people said, it's not about just amassing more money. And this guy's life is not miserable because he doesn't have zillions of dollars. And so I hope I think it has set some people free. I think there have been some very substantial donors, people that have really upped their income, and said, hey, I need to distribute. I'm a steward, not an owner too. So I think we can encourage each other in all kinds of ways to be better followers of Jesus. And part of that for us is talking about generosity and recommending generosity to people, helping people figure out how to give away money. So that's been part of our journey and coming on a podcast like this. Now it's awkward. I mean, because from a worldly standpoint, people think you're kind of the hero of the story you're telling, and that's awkward. And I can see why people don't want to do it. But I would encourage people to not necessarily to come out of the closet, but to consider, to pray about that, to be a steward of your story as much as you are a steward of your money, because your story might change somebody else's life. And that would be a great thing. And so I think our story has changed a lot of lives, and I'm thankful for it. I get notes from people a lot who watched the video and said, golly, this really helped me and my wife. And it's very encouraging to hear that kind of stuff. I'm sure there are some that look at what we're doing and thinking, man, you're tooting your own horn. And we have to keep we're human beings. We have to keep it in check. People say all kinds of nice things about me that aren't true. So we have to process through that. And sometimes people say, what keeps you humble? And I said, my wife does a good job with that.
Well, Alan, we really enjoyed hearing about the last 39 years of operating this business and even before then. But we're really curious to hear in this new season that you're transitioning into, what are you most excited about when you think about the next 5 to 10 years?
I'm just excited about a continued journey. I like what I do. I look forward to expanding our business more. I look forward to doing some more hiking. I'm planning to put on my packs more. I have 8 grandkids now. That's a great joy, and spending time with them is great. My wife is amazing. She has been a tremendous partner through this whole process. I have not been dragging her kicking and screaming through this. Quite the opposite. She's more committed than I am and an amazing, godly person. So I'm looking forward to living the rest of my life with her. So, I have a lot to look forward to. And it's not that I've been withholding things from myself all this time, and now I can finally do. I've been living a fun life for my whole life, and I just want to continue to do that.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly interested to see what God does in this next season with all that he's already done and all that he will continue on as you make some of these transitions. As we get to the end of the episode here, I wanted to leave some time for our Manager's Minute. We just like to end with a practical suggestion our listeners can take to step into their role as stewards and manage God's wealth wisely. So, Alan, do you have a suggestion for our listeners today?
Yeah, I do. I love the title of your podcast and the finish line. I think that is something that people should embrace. Let me just say a few words about what to do when you embrace that and there is surplus, and what to do with it. And my encouragement to you is to be intentional about that. Form relationships. You don't have to start something new. It doesn't have to be your idea. There are lots of good ideas, people that are changing the world, changing lives that you can engage with. And find some of those people and walk with them and ask them hard questions, understand what they're doing, invest with them, start small and invest with them more and more as time goes along. There's some amazing people that you get to be part of their journey, and it will enrich your life much more than some toys would. So I'd say embrace the whole concept that everything you have belongs to God. Find ways to distribute it in ways that change people's lives, and in ways that'll change your life.
Well, Alan, we really appreciate you joining us today. Your story has had a huge impact on Keelan and myself and countless others. And we just appreciate the way that you're willing to just be honest and vulnerable, what that path has looked like for you. We're just very grateful that you would come and spend some time with us today.
Oh, man, I love what you guys are doing. Thanks for letting me on. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to the show, guys. If you want to find any of our references or links from today's show, you can always find them in our show notes at finishlinepledge.com/episode 160. Before we finish up, I have a quick question for you. Have you ever stopped to answer the question, how much is enough? A financial finish line is designed to help you do just that. Our 90-day Finish Line Pledge breaks down the process into 3 easy steps. Step 1, define how much is enough for your family to spend in a single month, and use that as your monthly spending budget for 90 days. Step 2, as God provides money to manage, set aside any margin outside of your finish line into a separate bank account. Step 3, after 90 days, explore the millions of ways you can use the margin you've set aside. to create joy, purpose, and impact in God's kingdom. Want to learn more? Check out our website at finishlinepledge.com. That's it for today. We'll see you next time.